Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of That's So Matthew. Today, I am so excited because we are celebrating 3 years of the podcast. Wow, guys, it has been a year. It has felt like so little time, but so much time at the same time. The last anniversary special was the Live to Party special. This anniversary special, it doesn't really have a title besides like the 3-year anniversary special, but like we're totally gonna work with it. I have not done a solo episode in so long. The last solo episode I did was in August of 2021, and that is so insane because I have had so many amazing guests on with me that it just has felt like just a whirlwind of a year here on the podcast. So much has happened. We're going to be talking about all that good stuff. We're going to be talking about some of my favorite episodes from the past year. I love them all, obviously. And then we'll talk about some pod memories, some of my merch that I'm going to be having coming. And I'm going to be talking about the whole process of the rebrand of That's So Matthew, which, as many of you probably know, I started off 3 years ago as a Disney Channel podcast, solely Disney Channel. It was really just a extension of my life at that point. I had been watching so many Disney Channel shows and Disney Channel original movies, and so it just felt natural for me to come up with that kind of vibe for a podcast. I was in 8th grade at the time. I am now a junior in high school, which is absolutely insane. And next year, I'm going to be a senior. Hello, what? That is so insane. However, this year on the podcast has been so weird because I have taken a hiatus from the podcast, and then I came back with a rebrand, which I'm going to be talking about. But as you guys know, now I'm more of just a general nostalgia podcast, which I am so here for. I think that I loved the Disney Channel aspect for so long. I think it really worked. The formula was perfect, but all good things must come to an end, and I'm still not like done talking about Disney Channel. Like, I'm sure at some point I will be going back to discussing Disney Channel movies that maybe I didn't get to discuss the first time around, and there's just so many more opportunities for DComs and guests with this rebrand that I think it has ultimately benefited the podcast for sure. And I feel like everyone pretty much can agree that this has really been a helpful transition for the podcast. For me, the podcast is kind of in a new little era, if you will. I have been saying that word so much recently, but the podcast has been just so crazy. But before I get really into the rebrand talk, I just want to talk about some of my, favorite episodes from the past year. I released so many episodes this past year. I believe it was almost like, it was about 50 episodes, which is insane, obviously. So the last anniversary special was episode 77. Oh my gosh, guys, that feels like forever ago, but it really just was a year ago. So this will be episode 126 minus 77. So I've released 49 episodes in this past year, which is so crazy. I'm so blessed. I feel so lucky. I had so many amazing guests. This was truly like one of my favorite years of the podcast ever. I mean, we started off the third year with Get a Clue, and it was such an amazing episode with Karina from Confessions of a Talking Freak. What an amazing episode. Then we had amazing other episodes, like I love Stuck in the Suburbs with Allison from Past Foot Forward and Bob from the DJ Bob Show. Amazing. Read It and Weep with Hannah and Dwani over at Even the Little Things. Such an amazing duo. Some of my favorite people ever. The That's So Matthew Awards, the second one, that one was always fun because it is such a like wild ride to do a solo episode, I feel like, and that one is it's one of my favorites, honestly. We also hit episode 100, guys. That is so insane. That was Gotta Kick It Up with Isabel from Just Isabel Things podcast. I absolutely am obsessed with her, and I love her. She's one of my favorite people ever as well. We did Spooky Season again, which obviously is such a vibe because we had so many amazing episodes. Phantom Megaplex, Halloween Town High, Under Wraps, Twitches 2, The Scream Team. Just so many amazing episodes that I'm just so, like, grateful that I did. Just amazing. And then obviously we get to some of the rebrand stuff, which I'll be talking about a little bit more in just a minute. But these episodes truly have, like, been so amazing. Like, I have really gone through, like, a, like, rediscovery with the podcast, just with even in the past couple of weeks, the past year, because I have really not understood, like, where the podcast was going for the longest time. Like, I didn't feel like I was doing anything with the podcast. I felt like I was just a tiny little podcast in this giant world of podcasts, and that I never had any chance for success, which is totally false. Like, even right now, the podcast is doing absolutely amazing, and I'm so excited, and I love it so much. This week, the week that I'm recording this episode, which is also the same week that it is being published, it is my biggest week in almost 2 months here on the podcast in terms of downloads, which is so amazing because, you know, it is a little discouraging. I always say this when you see the numbers that aren't exactly what you wanted, and this is exactly what I want. I want people to be checking out the podcast. I want people to be supporting the content that I put out, and with this rebrand, it's really been hit or miss, and I think that that's something that is so important, that I'm getting this feedback from you all that you've been enjoying the show by listening to the podcast, and that is so amazing, and I appreciate you all so much. And that's, like, something that I think not a lot of people talk about. Like, the listens, you feel like the listens absolutely control you. And that is something that I feel like is really hard to, like, break out of that spell almost, because you want to get so much back. And if you're not getting that, then you might not be doing exactly as you want. So truthfully, it has been such a rewarding experience to kind of see how you all react in terms of downloads. Like, obviously, I'm like every other podcaster. I say I don't look at them, and then I do anyways. But I am so grateful because the rebrand has been really rough on, like, people not really sure what's going on with the podcast. And frankly, I wasn't sure what was going on with the podcast. But you all kept supporting, and I think that is absolutely so amazing. And it means so much. So thank you all so much for that. As always, it's such a blast to be recording these episodes, editing these episodes, publishing these episodes, recording for you, because it's just been such a great experience. I think this year the podcast has also taught me some life lessons about podcasting, which I think I should talk about. So for the longest time, I believed that a podcast episode had to be so long that it should have been like 80 minutes long. And for the longest time on the podcast, you can see that reflected in my episode length because they were just so obnoxiously long. And as time went on, I noticed that it really doesn't matter how long the episode is, because frankly, if it's long but there's less content and like of meaning, it's just equivalent of being nothing. And so that's why I think that it's so important to me to kind of just do what feels right with the episode length. And I've actually published some very short episodes in this past year, but it's because it feels natural. And maybe the conversation, like, it's not like a hate against the guest, but if the conversation isn't flowing in a way that it's going to keep going and there's going to be meaningful content, I think that it's okay to just have a shorter episode here and there, which was something I just really wasn't okay with for the longest time, because I just was like, I'm not producing enough content. Like, is this enough content for everyone? I've also learned a life lesson about announcing things that are still in the works, I guess I should say. Like, my anniversary month this month, I wanted to publish 2 episodes a week. I had guests lined up, everything, and then stuff happened and it didn't work out, unfortunately, which obviously is okay. I think that's another thing I've learned, is it's okay to be not as hard on yourself as you always need to be. Like, I used to be so hard on myself, like editing and everything, that I was so like scared of like what would happen if I didn't record an episode that's like 80 minutes long, edit an episode for 5 hours or whatever. It just like taught me such a lesson. And like this new rebrand as well, and like Instagram is such a hard place. I have not gained that many followers in the past year because Instagram is like such a plateau where like if you're not constantly like putting your work into it, it creates problems because you're not receiving what you want in return, I guess. And it's just so difficult for me to like always publish. I try to publish on Instagram, post, same thing, like 3 times like a week. Like I am trying so hard like to get a following on Instagram, and it is definitely an interesting thing. I've also learned to stop just like giving dates and times for things that aren't set in stone, because the amount of times in the past like week or so I've had to be like, oh wait, sorry, this didn't happen. This is another good life lesson. I am so sorry that this episode is all over the place. It's this whole episode, what did you expect? But like, I used to be like so petrified if I did not publish an episode at exactly 12 a.m. I was like a horrible podcaster. That is not the case at all. I have published many episodes past 12 a.m. in this past year because unfortunately things happen. Like this episode that is probably going to be not published at 12 a.m. because I'm a busy guy. Like I am a high school junior. I just took the ACT. I'm in musicals. I had a performing job. I'm going to have a performing job again this summer. Like this is like the thing where it's okay to not be like perfect. And that's okay for you to like realize. And I think that each podcaster like realizes at different points. Like taking weeks off, I don't typically take weeks off. However, I did take a interesting hiatus, which is something I was never like thinking I would ever do again. But I took a hiatus, and I'm really glad that I did. I took about a month and a half long hiatus in between season 6 and 7 of the podcast, which end of season 6 was November 12th, and then the beginning of season 7 was actually on December 24th with a special episode, but then we didn't start up with actual real episodes again until January 7th. And this is where I think I can talk about the rebrand in kind of its entirety, because this is kind of a process that was like over a year in the making, I think, decision-wise, but obviously you're always like scared of the reaction of the listeners, because obviously the listeners usually come first. Like, you know, that's just how I feel personally. And so I actually have the post, I believe, here. I'm going to pull it up on my Instagram archive so I can read you what I said when I announced my rebrand that would be occurring. Okay, let's find it here. It's in here somewhere, guys. I promise. Okay. May 24th, I announced that this Friday I will begin season 6 of the podcast, which is so crazy. I have decided that this will be my last solely Disney Channel based season. I will begin to cover other movies from my childhood regardless of the company. This is a change I've looked into for a while and look forward to this change of pace when the time comes. While it may seem far away, I anticipate the change to begin November 19th, 2021 with the start of season 7. Well, it did not happen on November 19th, first off. But that's okay. I digress. I think that's like another thing. You need to be like okay with things not working out the way you want them to. And I think that that's something that I just needed to figure out, and I finally did. Like, so the whole rebrand story, I had decided to announce on May 24th that this would happen, and I had no idea what was to come later in that year. I had no idea that I was not going to be able to start on November 19th like I thought I was going to, which is kind of like, it's okay. Things change. And so when I first announced that, I was really scared. However, I received like such an amazing, like overwhelming amount of support that it made me feel like this was the right decision for the podcast going forward, which is always like an amazing feeling because you never want to lose your listeners. And obviously I did this for almost 2-3 years. So like, is this something that I'm going to be able to change, you know? And that is something that it takes a lot out of you. I'll be honest, to be like, is this going to be a change that benefits everyone? And sure, it was scary, but like, here we are, and the rebrand is going amazing. So flash forward a couple months, I started getting into the rebrand design. I started trying to come up with a rebrand like vibe back in September. I really was like working hard. I really wanted to go for something different than what I had done before with the branding. And so I decided on these really like modern, like gradient, which is so exciting. The gradient is like pink and orange, and I absolutely am obsessed 100% with this very modern typeface logo, which is so amazing. I love just the modern vibes of this like podcast, but it also gives like the nostalgic 90s feel, which is something I'm really glad about because it creates much like, I don't want to say like, what word do I want to use? Like a comparison almost between like the 90s and this like modern day logo. And it's just like my favorite thing ever. And this rebrand, the website rebrand. I also brought on my first team member in this past year, which is Monse. She's my web designer. She's working hard on a complete redesign of the site pretty much. I can't wait to see what she's got up her sleeve. And so in early November, I was offered a job which I had wanted for years, being a performer at a theme park. And so the first thing that comes to my mind is, what about the podcast? Because as much as I love the podcast, the job was always my number one. That's something that I've wanted since I was younger. There was no like in between. Like I was going to take the job either way, and the podcast was going to have to take a break. When I first announced that the podcast was going to take a break, I was so like nervous because it's a big jump. It was a long break. It wasn't just like I wasn't posting for one single week. It was a long time. And that post I'm going to read now because excuse me. Wow, my voice sounds so like I'm so sick. I promise I'm not. It says, "Hello everyone. After a difficult decision, I decided that after next week's episode 110, instead of rebranding right away, I am taking a hiatus from the podcast. I will begin the rebrand and publish new episodes beginning again on January 7th, 2022. Until then, enjoy all the episodes published, and I look forward to this new chapter in 2022. So, yes, perfect. I loved it. It was exactly what I needed for this break, and I stopped posting on Instagram, which I said I wouldn't do, but I did it anyways, and I'm such a scandalous. I'm such a rebel. But, like, I just kind of needed to do what I needed to do, and like things like happen, and I'm really like, also my feed redesign is one of my favorite things ever with the gradient, like 10 out of 10 always. So the rebrand comes around, I start booking guests. I had DJ Bob come kick us back off, and my friend Hannah, Carter, Isabel, everyone who has done an episode on the rebrand is like my favorite people ever because they've made me like this whole process so much easier, because finding guests for something that is not what you were like doing for or going for in like the first place is always like so scary. Like, but the amount of guests and people that have like came forward and helped out with this podcast like remind me like why I do this podcast, because you have all been so supportive. Like when I did my first themed month in February, royalty month with Enchanted, Princess Diaries 1 and 2, and Ella Enchanted, I was not really sure how this was going to feel, if people were going to love it, hate it, and people loved it. And I'm so glad. This month for the anniversary month, there wasn't really a theme. It was kind of just a bunch of amazing movies all compiled into one month. And I'm so here for it. Like, don't get me wrong. I am so here for it. And that's something that I think takes a lot out of people to like realize that like there is so much planning that's going on. Like as I'm recording this episode towards the end of March, I'm already done through April and started through May, which is something super exciting because in May it'll be my first complete season of the rebrand, which is so exciting. And then we'll kick off season 8 in June, which is crazy to think about, but that's coming up very fast. It's in like 2 months, and I'm always booking ahead. I'm always looking for new guests, new things to talk about, new ways to spice up the podcast. And I think what I have in store for April with Twilight Month is something that is going to be really beneficial in that way, because I'm able to do something I've wanted to do for so long, which is like a theme month and then talk about all of the Twilight movies, because why not? And I've never seen any of them, so it's literally such an adventure for not just you all being on this themed month, but me as well, because we're living and learning this whole Twilight world together, and I love that so much. I also want to say that, like, doing these themed month makes planning easier, but, like, I always want your opinion, and, like, my guests, depending on if I'm doing a theme month, kind of depends on how I approach looking for guests, or if you're interested in coming on the show. It's a whole, like, new world of planning, which I never thought I'd have to go through, like, a year ago, because I just kind of did whatever Disney Channel, anything. I didn't focus about anything else. But now, with this rebrand, I've explored different ways of making the podcast more interesting, and I'm so grateful that I did. And with the rebrand as well, I like take a shot every time I say rebrand, honestly. And if you're under 21, shot of chocolate milk, obviously. But like, I just feel much more confident in the podcast, and it's just a movie podcast, and I'm so here for it. This nostalgic movie podcast is what I wanted for so long, and it's exactly what I have. So I'm very grateful for the support, and it has been honestly so beneficial for me to know that you all are enjoying it. And so 10 out of 10, the support has been amazing. Another thing about the rebrand is with like the logo, I was really unsure how to approach it with like everything, and I feel like I've done such an amazing job of like keeping the branding consistent. Some people said that the branding has become more strong with the rebrand, and I'm so grateful that everyone feels that way. Not everyone, but like that people have felt that way, because you know, it is like you want to make sure that you're doing what people love. And so I do not plan on changing my logo for a long time, so don't even worry about that. You know, I will probably be keeping it for at least a year. So after that, obviously, I mean, this could change. I didn't think I was going to change my logo even with the rebrand, and I did. So the rebrand, like, also, it's just like a new chapter, and I felt like a new logo is something that I needed and was like super, I don't want to say beneficial, but like it just felt like a natural time to transition into this new era of the podcast, as I always say. So moving on from the rebrand, I'm going to talk a little bit about the merch that I have available and some of the new merch that's going to be coming out. So obviously I have merch. I've had merch for many years, almost since the beginning. Well, actually not since the beginning. It's been about 2 years. So in this, you can access this on my website. Go to that'ssomatthew.com and then click on Shop TSM, which stands for That's So Matthew, if you didn't figure it out. JK. And there are many different designs. We have a That's So Matthew Classic Retro, which is our OG logo with a Yay Me. I am exceptional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to That's So Matthew, which is our intro. We have the Nostalgia Collection. We have the LOL crew neck, which is our newest line of merch. It is a limited time offer. It is the first piece of rebrand merch. However, there will be new rebrand merch coming in just a little bit. We have two new items, two new designs. The first one is I Know That's So Matthew, and then the next one is the old Matthew can't come to the phone right now. Why? Because he's dead. Which is a Taylor Swift reference, and also because people have said that they love this explicit version of the podcast, and you know what? I do too. Not all episodes are explicit, but the ones that are will always be marked explicit wherever you get your podcast, because I feel like that's like a simple thing that I can do as a podcast host to make sure that you have that content warning. And as well, we also talked about something that required a content warning on the podcast, which is the Perks of Being a Wallflower episode, which is obviously something super important, and that content warning was much necessary. So that episode with DJ Bob is absolutely one of my favorites. Go check it out. It's an emotionally raw episode. I'm pretty sure I cried while recording it, so if that gives you any idea. But I also cry very easily. Anyone else who cries easily out there, just, you know my pain of just crying like a little baby for absolutely no reason, out of nowhere. yeah, so go check out my merch. There's some fun designs. There will be new designs for the rebrand merch with the new rebrand everything as we look forward to another year of the podcast. I want to talk about some simple things that everyone can do to help support the podcast in a new way. So, coming soon-ish, I will be having a survey about a brand new way to support the podcast and get something in return. So, essentially, it is a Patreon service type, all on Spotify and Anchor. I'm not sure what I want to call it or how I want to market it. I will probably call it like That's So Matthew Plus or something, but you will pay a small charge, a small fee for bonus episodes, which will be published 2 times a month. I'm thinking this fee will be about $1.99, so it's pretty cheap, but it's an easy way to support the podcast and get some bonus episodes in return. So if this is something that you're interested in, let me know, because I'm totally looking into it, because this is a great way to support the podcast. And another thing is that you should see about is that we are always looking for support on the podcast. And the way that you can support the podcast is by doing this new That's Matthew Plus service, which will be dropping probably within a month, and buying our merch, because that is monetary support. But if we just need other support, simple things such as listening to an episode, sharing an episode, following us on Instagram, leaving us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts is so helpful, because it allows us to reach more audience members so that more listeners can experience the fun that we have over here on That's So Matthew. If you're interested in being a guest, I will have my guest form linked below. One quick thing about the guest form: just because you fill it out does not mean that you're guaranteed to be on the podcast. I do get a lot of guest requests to be on the podcast, and unfortunately I cannot make them all come true at this very moment. And it also depends on what you're going to be talking about. I will only talk about a topic one single time, so just be aware that obviously if I've already talked about it, will not be talking about it again. And as I go into continuing this rebrand, I'm still figuring things out with theme months. I can tell you that we will not have a theme month in probably May. May is just looking like a great time for just a bunch of movies. I've already got 2 guests lined up, and I'm so excited. They're very random choices, but very great choices that don't really necessarily fit together, but I'm so excited for. I also, another way to support is just by just reaching out with us. If there's anything that you want to see from us, like if you want to hear us talk about a specific movie, if you want to hear us talk about anything, just let us know. If you have any theme month ideas, if you have any ways that we can improve the podcast in any way, do it. Let us know, because that is so helpful, so beneficial for us, because we want to know how we can continue to make the podcast better for everyone. And in that sense as well, we're always here. If anyone needs any podcast advice, we will try our best. We are a team of 1 podcaster, and it's a lot. I feel like I do the editing, recording, and then I obviously have Monse on my web design, which she's such an amazing human. I can't wait to have her on the podcast, introduce her to you all in just a little bit when she's done with the site. But it has been such a crazy year here on the podcast. I think I should talk about some goals that I have for the coming year. I would love to have a special celebrity quote unquote guest on the pod, or someone that's from Disney Channel or a nostalgic movie. I would love to do at least 3 more theme months in the next year. I want to post consistently. I would love to do a 2 episodes a month thing at some point. Maybe we'll try it out. We'll see. Let's see. I would also love to do more Instagram lives. I haven't done one in a really long time. I also want to get back on my social media game, which I've kind of fallen off of a little bit, but that's totally okay. We will always make it work to the best of our ability. I would also just really love to send out more newsletters, get the site back not back, but like to a spot where I'm obsessed with it, which obviously with Monse's help, I'm sure will be accomplishable. I want to just keep having fun here at That's So Matthew. Keep going on my little Twitter, going with the vibes. Keep connecting with podcasters from everywhere and just trying to do as much as I can to continue to grow this podcast. It is something that I would love to continue with even as I go into college, which is crazy to think about. But we will obviously cross that bridge when we get there, and I can't wait to continue my journey of being a podcaster as well. And I also love all the support that I've received from everyone. It has been amazing. From new people, from people who have been supporting us this entire time. And I am so excited to see what comes in the next year here on That's So Matthew. So I want to thank everyone so much for listening to this special episode all about the journey of the podcast, the rebrand on our 3rd anniversary. I cannot wait to see what the podcast does next, and I cannot wait to see what happens when I have your support in this next year as we continue the rebrand and go into the 4th year of That's So Matthew. Wow, insane. But I appreciate you all so very much. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, all the places at That's So Matthew, and check out my website, thatsmatthew.com, for all the fun stuff on there, as well as the merch that I discussed in today's episode. And keep your eye peeled for the new merch, which will be dropping very, very soon. You can also stay tuned for Twilight Month next month here on the podcast. I cannot wait. I've already started recording some of these amazing episodes, and they are so amazing. And I'm definitely becoming a Twilight stan. Spoiler alert, so stay tuned. Thank you all so much for the support. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in another episode again soon. Bye.